If Jets fans only had time to watch one draft preview video, it should be this one. That was my goal when I started doing the homework for this one 3 weeks ago. Really excited to get into it. We're going to break down 20 prospects the New York Jets could target in the first and second rounds, respectively, in this year's draft. We're going to touch on day 3 as well. A couple of quick notes as we get into it to guide our thinking. We are assuming the Jets will have Aaron Rodgers. We are assuming they will not be targeting a quarterback, a running back, or a cornerback in the first round of the draft. We're also assuming that Jalen Carter and Will Anderson will be off the board, and we're keeping an open mind. So with that said, let's get into it. Can't wait.
Hold up.
The young man on your screen is the first member of a tier I call Dream Come True at pick 13 tier. If either of these prospects are still on the board when the Jets are picking at 13, you sprint like Rich Eisen doing the 40 to the podium. You turn in that card. Peter Skoronski, offensive tackle, Northwestern, and a damn good one. Initial takeaway, flawless technique. He is a heavyweight fighter, man. He's got a counter for every punch, and he is always on his feet. His resume is beyond reproach. When he gets his hands on you, you're done. I don't even need to Google it. I bet you he was an elite high school wrestler. I watched 4 games on Skoronski, including Ohio State. That's where I started, allegedly his worst game, and didn't have the same push in the run game as the other 3 games I watched, but only allowed 1 pressure and no sacks in his worst game. I don't think he has any weaknesses. In fact, there's not a weakness. There's really a question. Is he a guard or is he a tackle? He's got the same 32.25-inch arms that Elijah Vera Tucker had. And his former teammate, Rashawn Slater, same build, dropped in to the Chargers, top 8 offensive tackle immediately. Now, worst case scenario, are the Jets, you draft him, he can't play tackle. Now you have 2 AVTs. Love it. Rock, paper, scissors for who plays right guard and who plays right tackle. And you have the right side of your offensive line good to go for the next 8 years. Bottom line on Skoronski, he's the best offensive lineman in the class. He's the most technically sound. He's the most ready to contribute right away. If he's there, you take him. You don't think twice. Also in the Dream Come True tier is Paris Johnson Jr., offensive tackle, Ohio State. Initial takeaway, this kid's smooth, man, like a ballerina. Length and foot quickness combination. Do not allow him to get beat by speed to the outside. Allowed 2 sacks in 449 true pass blocking sets. Adjusts well to stunts and twists and secondary blitzes. Heady player, good football IQ. Excellent as a blocker in space. Would be a great fit for the Jets zone blocking scheme. You can pull him in the run game. Weakness, ends up on the ground a lot. I don't know if he's guessing in pass pro or tends to lean a little bit. He's new to the position in 2022 after playing left guard. The bottom line on Johnson, maybe you could argue has the highest floor of any of the offensive tackle prospects, even though I think Skoronski's a better player, but you know day one that Paris Johnson is your starting tackle. So there's some certainty with the position there that may have him higher than Skoronski on some people's boards, and I'm just fine with that because he is also in the Dream Come True tier. Next, I have a couple of other first-round offensive line prospects that I call the big nasties. The first big nasty, Darnell Wright. My initial takeaway on Darnell Wright is, who hurt you? Why are you so angry, Darnell? This kid plays nasty, mean. He's a mauler. He is the opposite of Paris Johnson Jr. stylistically. Now, I had to watch the broadcast footage of most of these games, but I was able to catch one all-22 game of Tennessee because I was checking out Kalijah Cansey for Pitt, who we'll talk about later. But Cansey's bull rush, nothing for Darnell Wright. Ditto that, Will Anderson. You're going to get cute like Will Anderson did. Try a little spin move, give him your back. He's going to feed you some turf. Hand placement, footwork, excellent. Allowed 0 sacks in 507 pass blocking snaps. The weakness is, doesn't block very well in space. Maybe not the best fit for the Jets zone blocking scheme as a run blocker getting to the second level. Elite speed guys to the next level may give him a problem, but you could say that about most right tackles in the NFL. Bottom line, he's a day one starter. He is as good a pass protector as any of the guys we'll mention after him, but he can only do it on the right side and most likely. Pro comp, Taylor Moton, Carolina Panthers. The next big nasty is the biggest and the nastiest. Dawand Jones, offensive tackle of Ohio State, teammate of Paris Johnson Jr. My initial takeaway is, oh my goodness, is that Mekhi Becton, 6'8", 375, actually slightly bigger than Becton. His 80-inch wingspan was a combine record. Just like Darnell Wright, he has a good anchor versus speed to power in the run game. Like Mekhi Becton, he will toss linebackers aside with his pinky. Now, very subpar foot speed ideally would go to a team that doesn't ask him to block a lot of 7-step drops, better with a shallow pocket, better with a mobile quarterback. The bottom line is I think he is a day one starter at right tackle, but there is a drop off between him and some of the other first round prospects. So I think he's only a fit for the Jets if they trade down to say the mid 20s and still want to get an offensive tackle. I think in that circumstance, Dawand Jones could be an option. Probably gone though by the time the Jets are picking in the second round. The next tier has 2 more first round offensive line prospects, and I call this tier hold up, wait a minute, because you might have to be patient with both of these young men. First being Anton Harrison, offensive tackle, Oklahoma. Initial takeaway, why isn't he being mocked sooner? If in 3 years from now you told me Anton Harrison is the best pass blocker out of any player in the 2023 NFL draft, not shocked. Excellent getting to his spot in the run game as well. Almost never beaten across his face, able to protect his quarterback without hugging or grabbing. Fluid, smooth. Weaknesses, he needs to add some weight. He's actually listed at the same height and weight as Broderick Jones, but if you watch both of them, he looks a little frail, and Jones plays much stronger, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but he's also younger than most of these guys, yet to turn 22. Bottom line on Anton Harrison is you got to be a little patient. He needs some coaching. He needs to add some weight. But I think he can compete to be a day one starter. And if you play the long game, you could be really happy if you ended up with Anton Harrison in the first round. Pro comp, if he hits, Charles Cross, who was a plug and play starter as a rookie at left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks last year. The next and final player in the hold up, wait a minute tier is Broderick Jones. Initial takeaway is he's the anti-Anton Harrison. They're both, I wouldn't call them developmental prospects because they could play right away, but I think it's going to take them a while to reach their ceiling. And his strengths are the opposite of Anton's strengths. Elite run block, probably the best run blocker in space of any tackle in the class, I'd say. Perfect fit as a run blocker for the Jets' outside zone scheme. You see shades of Dwayne Brown as a run blocker. You do. Raw athleticism, absolutely has the tools and the traits to be molded into a franchise left tackle. Weaknesses, raw. Only 200 true pass pro sets in his college career. He has that unorthodox hand placement, a little stiff, a little rigid, foot speed, not ideal, but the bottom line is he is a toolsy left tackle prospect that will be a plus run blocker on day one, some patience, some coaching, and he can become a well-rounded left tackle. Pro comp for him is Orlando Brown Jr. Next tier for the first round, we're done with the first round offensive lineman. And the next tier I call, is he too good to pass up? One player in this tier, that's JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Wide receiver, Ohio State, 6', 195. My initial takeaway is I feel the same way about him that I felt about Garrett Wilson last year. And he has the it factor. And I know that sounds like just a lazy argument, but when you watch Garrett Wilson last year, you know what I'm talking about. The kid just moves different. He can play. That's how I feel about Jackson Smith-Njigba. The strengths, how about this? Hasn't catching the ball become an underrated part of evaluating wide receiver prospects? What's his 40 time? What's his height? How about, can he catch the ball? Jackson Smith-Njigba, yes. Caught 80% of his targets in 2021. We're talking about 2021 because he was injured last year. We'll talk about that in a bit. The contested catch rate, the drop rate in the top 10 percentile, absolute destroyer of zone defenses, elite awareness, finding soft spots in coverage, excellent contested catch ability for his size, plays at his top speed throughout the route. Weaknesses, doesn't have a lot of the twitchiness or suddenness or straight line 40 speed that you'd like in a receiver taken this high. And he probably has to play in the slot most of the time. So if you're a team that plays a lot of 12, a lot of 21 personnel, probably not a great fit, but I think the Jets are going to run a lot of 11, and he would eat in the slot. Bottom line for JSN is there's a good chance that he is the best player available at pick 13, and if they don't sign Odell Beckham Jr., I think that Corey Davis being replaced by Jackson Smith-Njigba is a realistic situation for the Jets. Pro comp for him, I think a higher ceiling version of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who came into the NFL and started pumping out 1,000-yard seasons immediately for the Detroit Lions. The next tier, I have a few players that I call talented misfits. And we'll find out why. The first talented misfit is Nolan Smith, edge, Georgia. My initial takeaway is that's the fastest edge player I've ever watched. Strengths, one of the most ridiculous athletic profiles of any player in the draft. As a 238-pound edge, a sub 4.40, a 40-plus inch vertical leap, 10.8 in the broad jump, a faster 40 time than Garrett Wilson had last year at 238 pounds. Unreal. But he's not just a combine warrior. When I watched him, the first thing I expected to see was a really poor run defender. Now, I wouldn't say that he sets the edge, but he blows right by the edge. He crosses the faces of defenders so fast and makes plays in the backfield all the time. An excellent run defender in college. He led the nation in both pass rush win rate and run stop rate of all these edges. The only defensive lineman who was better in those metrics was Jalen Carter, best player in the draft. Weaknesses, you're betting on an outlier because most sack artists traditionally in the NFL, if you look at all the leaders in sacks, 85% of those guys are 250 pounds plus. So you're betting on him being one of these Robert Quinn, Hassan Reddick, undersized, productive edge rushers. Bottom line, I think he's a misfit because I think ideally he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think if you're the Jets and you're asking him to put his hand in the dirt on first and second down as a rookie, he's going to get taken for a ride by some offensive linemen. You look at the Jets. The Jets played JFM at edge. He's 290 pounds. So I think the size profile, probably not a fit for the Robert Saleh defense, but my goodness, he is as efficient an edge as there is in this class. And I was really surprised by him. The next talented misfit is Kalijah Kancey, defensive tackle, Pitt. My initial takeaway is he's the defensive tackle version of Nolan Smith, another absolutely absurd athletic profile. And when I watched him, the first game I watched was Tennessee. He's just annoying. I started getting physically annoyed for the people having to block him. There is not a single play where you assign one human to block him that he doesn't impact the play. Ever. You pause the film. By the time you press play again, he's already in the backfield. The get-off is ridiculous. The production last 2 years, 17 sacks, 19 hits, 49 hurries combined. Unreal. Now the weakness is, 280 pounds, 6'1", short arms. Can he be a down in and down out defensive tackle in the NFL? I think it's going to take a team that's willing to move him around. Bottom line, though, next to Quinnen Williams, he ain't going to be getting double teamed. And if you're putting him one-on-one for centers and guards in the NFL, he is going to live in the backfield. And if you're the New York Jets at pick 13, you either have to get somebody who's going to ideally help your quarterback or make life hell for the other quarterback. Kalijah Kancey does the latter really, really well. Love him. The final talented misfit is Brian Branch, safety, Alabama. My initial takeaway on Branch is that's kind of why we got Chuck Clark. Now, I'm not saying Chuck Clark is Brian Branch. Please. Brian Branch did his job as well as any player who will likely be available at pick 13 in the country. Excellent at his job. I just don't know if his job is as valuable or as big of a need as some of the other guys you mentioned, particularly the offensive linemen. Strengths, excellent instincts as a run defender, takes on and sheds blocks like a linebacker. He navigates through traffic to find the ball carrier. Efficient tackle, 3% missed tackle rate. Man, our safety room could have used that last year. A high IQ football player, good in zone coverage. Weaknesses, gets beat vertically in man. And I think that he's probably a strong safety nickel hybrid. I don't know if he's the traditional free safety the Jets have coveted. Bottom line, though, I still would consider safety a position of need. And anytime the best player at a position you need is available, you have to consider it. I would think just like Dawand Jones, probably only a candidate for the Jets if they trade down to the mid-20s to get Branch, who I would compare to Swiss Army knife C.J. Gardner-Johnson if he does hit. Honorable mention in this tier to tight end Dalton Kincaid. Just don't see it happening. Don't want to waste too much time on that. The next group of players, we're going to head into the second round. And if you're still here and appreciate it, the video, find any value in it, a thumbs up or subscribing is a really easy way to show it. By far the most amount of homework I've ever put into a video on this channel. It's not what I'm known for, so I know it's not going to get a ton of views, but I appreciate you guys that are in here. Hopefully it's valuable information to you. Now, the next tier of players, second round prospects, I call plug and play centers. The first one is fan favorite, John Michael Smith, center, Minnesota. Initial takeaway. Why do we got to sign Ben Jones when we can draft Ben Jones? Because you look at their player profiles, man, really similar. The strengths for Michael Smith's demonstrates adequate power for the position. That's an outdated weight there. He's bigger than that. He was 320 at the combine. Doesn't make mistakes. Best technician in pass pro of any interior offensive lineman in the class, in my opinion. Excellent balance. If Schmitz is on the ground, it's because he took you there. Weaknesses, limited long-range athleticism for sure. A good prospect, not like a Linderbaum prospect where he's going to be Kevin Mawai at the second or third level. Not quite there. Age might be a concern for some. He'll be close to 25 by the time the season starts. Not a huge deal for me. Bottom line, best center in the class by most people's standards. But I do think the gap between him and some of the other centers has been a little bit exaggerated. And we did mention the pro comp, if he hits, could be Ben Jones. I think he could start day one if the Jets don't sign a veteran center. Next up in the plug-and-play center tier, Steve Avila, interior offensive lineman, TCU. My initial takeaway is this guy is a guard. I think he ends up playing guard at the next level, but a lot of people who know ball better than me disagree, so we will put him in this tier. His strength is his strength. As much power as any interior offensive lineman in the class, does not get beat by power with defensive tackles. Doesn't get shed off of his blocks easily at all. Experienced, over 2,000 snaps at TCU at both guard and center. Weaknesses, loses to speed rushers who can get to the edge of his frame. And I don't know if he has the athleticism that you'd love to see in an interior offensive lineman or a zone blocking scheme. Pro comp, Isaac Semialu. Bottom line is, hey, if people say he can play center, the Jets have to consider him with a top 45 pick, but I have a hunch he's going to end up kicked over at guard at the next level. Final member of this tier, plug and play centers, is Luke Whippler. Initial takeaway. According to who? According to who is he not in the conversation for best player in the draft, Ohio State? Not according to me. Or I'm sorry, best center in the draft. I think he's in the conversation for sure. Let's start with the weakness because it's so obvious. If you see him in shorts and a t-shirt, he looks like a fullback. He is small. Listed at right at 300 pounds, significantly smaller than Schmitz and Avila, who have 20 and 30 pounds in him respectively, but he has the best get off in the class by far. Best lateral movement by far. Over 1,500 snaps, 1 QB hit, 0 sacks allowed. Absurd production, and he's 2 years younger than some of these other guys. You can pull him, kick him out on screens. Awareness is right up there with JMS. Him next to AVT, we're cooking with gas. This kid can move. Bottom line, I don't know if he's the best center in the class, but I think he's the best center for the Jets because he fits what they want to do so perfectly. And if you can get him, I think he's worth one of those picks in the 40s. Honorable mention in this tier to Joe Tippmann, who some people see as a second-round prospect, but I just happen to respectfully disagree. The next tier of second-round prospects we will call Q's number 2 because Quinnen Williams needs himself a running mate at interior defensive line, and I think Mazi Smith can be that. My initial takeaway is hell yeah. Hell yeah, give me this Goliath man-eater next to Quinnen Williams. And I know, he's more of a two-gapper. That's not what Robert Saleh wants in his defense. Look, what Robert Saleh wants in his defense is damn good ball players, and that's what he is. And he would be well within the top 40 players in the draft, and he's at a position that you need. So at some point, it's not rocket science. This kid makes your team better immediately. Now, he takes on double teams in the run game, holds the line, 11% run stop rate. Only defensive tackle who was doubled as much as him and had a better run stop rate was Jalen Carter. Collapses the pocket when rushing the passer. Weaknesses, there is a ceiling or some limitations, at least right now as a pass rusher. You're not going to see him pulling off fluid swim moves or push and pulls. If he could do that at 337 pounds, he'd be Dexter Lawrence and he'd be a top 15 prospect. He's not that yet. But the bottom line is the Jets, although they were a really good defense last year, were vulnerable against the run. And this kid comes in and he stops that immediately. Pro comp, Linval Joseph, who's been around the league a bunch, but in his prime was a Pro Bowl run-stuffing defensive tackle. Next in this tier of Q's number 2, Keanu Benton, interior defensive line, Wisconsin. My initial takeaway is this kid's a pro, man. Like the experience, 3 years of significant playing time at Wisconsin. Weighed in at 314 at the combine. Honestly, he plays even stronger than that. The combination of length and strength, particularly when matched up against centers, he is a matchup nightmare. Doesn't shed blocks as well as Smith, but he can control other grown men with one hand. The weakness is, I think, you'd like to at least talk yourself into maybe a Pro Bowl ceiling with a top 45 pick. I don't see it with him. I just think there's limitations as a pass rusher. But the bottom line is he'd immediately be a starter next to Quinnen Williams in this defense based on how the roster is right now. And after him, there is a massive drop-off at defensive tackle after Smith and Benton, in my opinion. Pro comp, Davis Onyemata could be a decent one for Keanu Benton. Now, the next tier of players I will call the missing piece because they provide skill sets that the Jets defense has been longing for quite some time. First member of this tier is Sidney Brown, defensive back, Illinois. Initial takeaway, best athlete of any safety in the class, in my opinion. Has cornerback speed, 4.47 40. Honestly, plays even faster than that. Versatility, used all over the field. Single best trait is his ability to cover tight ends. How about that? Despite his size. Has the range to play the deep middle as a single high safety. Weaknesses, shield your eyes. 16% missed tackle rate. No. But the bottom line is he is a talent that could be molded into a position of need for the Jets. Now, this is a massive projection here. Okay, he wasn't asked to be a free safety in college, but I think a Jets comparison could be Marcus Gilchrist, a nickel corner free safety hybrid like Sidney Brown. Bottom line, a talented player, but I think you'd like more immediate impact of the top 45 pick. So we'll see. Next, love this kid. Daiyan Henley, linebacker, Washington. Actually, just found out the Jets took a visit with him today. Now, his strengths are, despite mediocre coverage analytics, the coverage stats are not kind to him, but the film is excellent fluidity, change of direction when mirroring tight ends and running backs. His suddenness flashes constantly. He cut his missed tackle percentage in half from 2021 to 2022. Very efficient as a blitzer. Weaknesses, there are some scheme and position limitations in terms of versatility. As a general scout, maybe you see that, but as a Jets fan, that's not a problem at all because he is exactly what Robert Saleh wants as a will linebacker in his defense. Hey guys, pro comp. If Quincy Williams could cover, it'd be Daiyan Henley. Love this kid, man. I had to talk myself into Sidney Brown a little bit just because we're so starving for a free safety, but this kid is absolutely one of the top 40 players in the draft, in my opinion. I'm higher on him than most, but I love me some Henley. Next, another second round prospect. This is too good to pass up, part 2. Remember, we had that conversation about JSN in the first round. I think if he's on the board, we may have to have that same conversation about Jack Campbell, linebacker, Iowa. Initial takeaway, he's aptly named because he's a jack of all trades. His strengths, playing freaking football. Diagnosis as well as any linebacker in the draft. Zone coverage, he's excellent, always in the right spot at the right time. Missed tackle rate, under 9%. It's good enough. Weaknesses, man coverage, not very twitchy, not very efficient as a blitzer. Now the 40 time was slow, but a lot of the other athletic measurables were a lot higher than people think. I think he might have tested himself into the late first round. Honestly, I've seen a lot of pro comps, interestingly enough, to CJ Mosley, and that brings us to our bottom line is if he's drafted by the Jets, where does he play? I think he'd be the perfect protege replacement for CJ Mosley in a year. You got to get an impact player right away if you're the Jets. Now, I think he's talented enough. You play him out of position year one, and then you figure it out from there. Be interesting what the Jets do if Jack Campbell is on the board. The next tier of second-round prospects I call OT Plan B. If the Jets don't get their offensive tackle in round 1, here are a couple options they could look to address in round 2. First one is Cody Mock, offensive lineman. He's a Bison, North Dakota State. Hey, my initial takeaway is that looks like Matt O'Leary Neanderthal version. The strengths are versatility, man. He is the most versatile offensive line prospect in the draft. Played left tackle. Some people project him as guard. Some people project him to be a center. Now, a ton of experience, over 2,000 reps, ridiculous pass pro production, 2 sacks allowed and 5 QB hits in his over 2,000 snaps. Crazy athlete, but plays with a mean streak for a guy who's that size. And speaking of size, that is the weakness. He was a tight end. He still kind of looks like a tight end, just barely over 300 pounds at 6'5 and a half. And the bottom line, most versatile offensive lineman in the class, would add depth immediately at all 5 positions for the Jets. But if you're picking in the top 45, again, you probably need a day 1 starter. And I don't know if Cody Mauch is that. The second member of the OT Plan B tier is Matthew Bergeron, offensive tackle, Syracuse. And initial takeaway is, I can live with that. I can live with Matthew Bergeron. Experience just like Mauch, over 2,000 snaps, has some playing time at right tackle. He doesn't miss assignments. He doesn't make mistakes. You never see him reacting or reaching late. He's a very heady player. He passes off stunts well. Other than that, the traits are pretty mid. The power, the foot speed, the athleticism, it's just not on par with some of the first-round prospects we touched on. And he was a little bit of a grabber. Over 20 penalties committed in 3 seasons at Cuse. Bottom line, plug-and-play offensive tackles traditionally are kind of a first-round thing in the NFL. And there is a significant drop-off, in my opinion, in the guys we were talking about at the top of the video, than to Mauch and Bergeron. But you could live with him in the second round if you were blown away by a prospect in the first round that you had to spend that pick somewhere else. Now I have 3 position notes for day 3. So these are guys who I have not watched yet, but I do think you want to keep your eye on a few different positions, and I have a couple players in mind for the 3 picks we have in rounds 4 and 5, respectively. Number 1, don't rule out another 4th or 5th round running back. I know the Jets, Robert Saleh says he loves their running back room. Breece Hall injured. Behind him, Michael Carter, 1 good year, 1 bad year. Bam Knight, only 1 year under his belt. Ty Johnson, depth piece. A guy they visited with is Dwayne McBride, who's pictured there, UAB. I watched like a 7-minute highlight clip. It's like a joke, man. It's 1,700 yards, over 7 yards per carry versus not great competition. I understand it, but I think the Jets could stand to add a body in the running back room in the later rounds. Also, the Jets will draft a linebacker, so if they don't end up with Hanley or Campbell, I think a 4th or 5th round linebacker is almost a guarantee. They have visited with Ventrell Miller of Florida. And then wide receiver. The Jets need to replace the Jeff Smith role, which is not very sexy. You don't do it in free agency. You don't spend a lot of money. You don't do it in the first round. But Jalen Moreno-Cropper could be a depth receiver / special teamer that rounds out the Jets' wide receiver room. And that'll do it. The complete guide to the New York Jets 2023 NFL Draft. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll talk ball soon.